Have you ever felt curious? Ever wanted to embrace what the world might have to offer? And maybe there's that trip that you've always wanted to take, or a skill you wanted to learn. You might have even felt the desire to expand your circle of friends or take a risk in a new town or a career path. Regardless of how the feeling manifests, eventually we all find ourselves wondering. We catch ourselves becoming curious. And curiosity is an insatiable feeling. It sends you into a world previously unknown, rife with wonder, punctuated with hardship, highlighted by successes, and teeming with possibility. At least, it can be. And sometimes curiosity takes you down paths you never really wanted. One day you're seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, and the next, not so much. But what do we do when the polarity of your perception is shaken? When you learn that the world that you live in is very different from the one that you wanted to explore. How do you or I begin to understand a diverse set of complicated, intertwined realities that make up not only our world, but our community, our neighborhood, our home? Though we may have our own worldviews, we really need to understand that our views aren't the only ones to exist. The world around us is ever-changing, and us along with it. And we feel it in our communities, and we feel it in our homes, in our very hearts. Change is a natural part of life, but it can be a scary thing to live through, a scary thing to watch. Have you found yourself wondering what shape our futures will take? Have you felt that curiosity tugging at you in moments of joy, moments of strife? I know I have. I've been curious about a lot of things lately. I find myself devoting more and more time to how did we get to this point in history? Questions like what rights and wrongs led us down this path that we're currently walking together? Are we even walking the same path? Or are we really as alone as it feels like we are sometimes? When did a world full of so much possibility become full of so much despondency? Looking back on years prior, even as recent as 2016, I wonder how a slightly younger me could have been so wholly unaware of the problems plaguing my American society. Divisions that were deepening, the hate that was festering, the ignorance that was harming. We have witnessed nearly unimaginable history come to pass in a significantly short period of time. 2020 alone. Its subsequent months, it's left millions on the doorstep of despair. However, for some communities and demographics, the struggle to survive has been a near daily undertaking since a hell of a lot longer than any decent human being should have to endure. How could any of us deny that our preconceptions have been shaken to their core? So now, like you, I'm left wondering, what comes next? What does this mean? What does any of this really mean for you? For me? It's curious how the values that I learned as a child just haven't quite seemed to survive into the adult world that I grew up to participate in. And so many of us catch ourselves thinking, where do we turn to for help? Who is there to right the wrongs and fix the broken parts of a complicated world that we now inherit? This world that we live in and that we love so much. A man in a red sweater and trainers once had a lot of things to say and ask about a world which seemed too big to comprehend. On a children's show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, a kind, slow-speaking Fred Rogers found that children, most of all, had a thirst for knowledge and understanding. They were curious. They wanted to get to know this great big world, even if it was, at times, a little scary. His young audience was, well, it was who he passed advice on to about navigating life's most troublesome moments. That in times of fear or uncertainty, we could still do at least one thing. Look for the helpers, because there are always those who are helping. It's a powerful phrase. But more powerful than that, perhaps, is the realization that those helpers that Fred Rogers was referring to, they weren't some ethereal group of people out there magically making the world a better place. See, Fred was talking about not some invisible squad of do-gooders doing the work for us so that we wouldn't have to. He was talking about us. He was teaching us so that when we were old enough, we wouldn't be afraid to lead by example, to help, to be curious. Not just about the world with all of its many complexities, but curious about how to make that world a better place. So it's up to us now to start answering some of these questions for ourselves. Because the last time I checked, those questions were starting to sound pretty important. Some of you may recognize me as Colorado Captain. I'm a charity cosplay figure who rides his Harley across the nation as Captain America. But my real name is Matt, and honestly, I'm just some guy in a suit. But like you, I'm also a guy with a lot of questions. And I, for one, am ready to start looking for some answers. So today, I invite all of you to join me in an open-minded, honest, and transparent podcast where I get to sit down with helpers from communities all over the country in order to learn what it might look like to start to heal a world that is hurting so much and in dire need of a little bit of hope. I'm Colorado Captain, and this is Cap Across Community. Welcome, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm the Colorado Captain. And today, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of hope, helpers, and how some of us might find a friend who's in need of a little bit of help, living in our own community. Have you ever wondered who's out there trying to make the world a better place? Or whether or not you might be able to make this world a better place? I know the question can feel really daunting at times, but in a world full of so many problems, a place where you can help someone, that's a good place to start. But how would you help them? And would they even want your help if you offered? A lot of you have probably met me through my work in charity cosplay, where I dress up as a superhero from the Marvel movie franchise, and I try to make people smile because I believe that the power of a smile can go a long way. But what happens when people don't need some guy in a costume? What happens when your child is sick in the hospital and you're not quite sure how much longer you have left to spend with them? What happens when you train to go overseas and defend our nation, and in the thick of it you find that you're actually only worried about keeping your fellow servicemen and women alive? J.M. Barrie, in his classic tale Peter Pan, he introduced us to the titular character of Peter, a young man full of vigor and adventure who famously exclaimed, "To live would be an awfully big adventure." So today I want to talk about what it takes to live a life for others, and see how we might be able to sustain hope for a brighter future that's brought about by the efforts of a community eager to lift each other up. My guests today are two very awesome gentlemen whom I've gotten to work with in the charity community, both inside and outside of costume. These guys have done a lot to not only inspire me, but many others in their lives. So please join me in welcoming my special guests, Kirk Brockman and Sterling Bailey. Hey guys. See, these fellows have been working in our communities to be a force for good. But rather than have me tell you all about them, I would really love to hear a little bit more from these guys as to who they are and what they're doing. Maybe even where you might catch them lending a helping hand. Sterling, I think I'd like to start with you first. Who are you, man? And how do you find yourself on this podcast today?
I think, like you, I'm a guy in a suit, right? That's the first thing I'd like to say. Just a man, just a human. But I am the founder of Cap for Kids, 501c3 nonprofit organization that helps kids with cancer, and a number of things. But that's one thing I do. I also work a day job, and I love people, and I'm just trying to help make this world a better place in every way that I can. But I'm just a guy on a journey trying to figure it all out too.
Sterling's journey is certainly noteworthy. As he sits across from me, framed by that Zoom border window that we've all come to know and love, it strikes me that this renowned individual could also be so humble. You see, Sterling Bailey is actually the founder and board president of Cap for Kids, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization supporting families who are battling pediatric cancer. It's also the organization that I raise money for every year. Now, he is an avid cosplayer, and something that's driven home by this is his current appearance on screen in a film-accurate Captain America suit. But it's not just during this interview that he dons the cowl and shield. He also does it while he's at Children's Hospital. Also a gamer, you can see this captain on Twitch as he's streaming to help raise funds for his organization's charitable efforts. But when he's not working on the charity, his cosplay, or his Twitch stream, Sterling can even be found leading the marketing infrastructure for a big software company in Silicon Valley. He's a man of many talents, but it's all these talents that are working together to serve his community. But a bit more on that in a moment. Kirk, welcome. My second guest joining us for this inaugural podcast is Kirk Brockman. Kirk, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you, man? And how do you find yourself on this podcast today?
Man, I'm just a guy sitting on the shoulders of giants. I like to say that I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I don't even think I'm that. I think I'm a person who's addicted to being inspired. And so I try to surround myself with people that inspire me, whether that's through volunteer cosplay, military, maybe we're working out, training, just in all of these environments, I kind of chase inspiration. So I try to find people who are very good at what they do. And then if I can just be on a fly on the wall and kind of become the product of my environment, then that's kind of what I'm looking for. But like Sterling said, I'm just a guy just riding the wave. I'm on the journey. And that's me. I don't know if that's exactly what I am, but that's what I do, or what I try to do.
You might have found yourself listening a little harder as Kirk began speaking just now. See, throughout his many adventures, Kirk has found himself sporting a soft-spoken demeanor, whilst developing some pretty kick-ass expertise. He's a cosplayer, and a volunteer-er from my home state of Colorado. After 8 years in the Army, Kirk began seeking his next mission, which led him to volunteer work like cosplay for a cause. And in addition to suiting up as an Avenger or a globe-trotting archaeologist, he spends his free time offering his skills as a trainer, helping his friends prepare for military service, martial arts competitions, bodybuilding shows, or maybe even just their own cosplays. He does a lot for such a quiet fellow. Speak softly, carry a big stick? Maybe. But this guy tends to be more about carrying a big heart and helping people in his community realize their potential, helping them achieve their goals. From serviceman to man who serves. he certainly brings a light touch to some of the more heavy topics that we'll cover in our podcast today. I'm anxious to hear what he says. Let's continue. So, on this episode of Capracross Community, we're embarking on conversations covering multiple topics like community, helping others, service and sacrifice, and simply whether or not there's still some hope to hold on to in the here and now. Now, both of you guys serve your community. You're a part of your community. So my question is, what does community mean to you? What does it mean to be a part of that community?
Sure thing. So there's so much to it. There's so much to community. I think at its base for me, it's a sense of connection and belonging to those around us, right? Understanding that we aren't alone, understanding that we're part of each other, whether it be on, just your family or a local community or a city or a state or a country or in the world. Just this concept that you're not alone, that there are other people out there that are like you, that have the same hopes and fears that you do, and this concept of being able to connect with them. And where I, of course, attached to that is this concept of being able to see my community members and see where some might need help, and see what I can do to step into to help them, or to tie other people who want to help those people but have no idea where to start or how to help, be able to connect those two dots. But this whole concept of bringing these people who might feel alone, who might feel separate, together, to realize that they are not alone. They are part of this community, whether it be small or large. That's what it is to me.
Yeah, because you get to look around and you see that you're surrounded by people who are going through the same life that you are, and how fascinating it is to know that your struggles and your successes are never actually that far apart from each other, if you look for it.
Right.
That's great, Sterling. Thank you. But I'm also curious, Kirk. What comes to mind as I ask you the same question? What does community mean to you, and what would it mean to be a part of a community?
I think it's kind of the springboard off of Sterling's answer. It's kind of like viewing the community as though we're some type of big jigsaw puzzle, and you are one of those pieces. And you might see how the puzzle would be incomplete without you. But your piece isn't any more or less important than any other pieces. They make up the big picture. And what I like about a jigsaw puzzle is that the pieces interlock. So you sort of count on each other. You're supporting, but you're also being supported. And I think that's the essence of a community, that you matter and that you are important. You're just as important as the person to your right and to your left. You're supporting them, but they're supporting you. And in that, you create the bigger picture. And who's to say that your bigger picture that you've just created for yourself isn't now becoming one big jigsaw piece that fits into a wholly bigger picture, and then so on and so forth. But that can't happen without you being the best puzzle piece you can be for your surrounding puzzle pieces. It's like the analogy of a chain, right? Where each link is important. And there's that quote, the strength of the team is the individual, and the strength of the individual is the team. So if you think of a community in any sense, whether it's a tribal village, apartment complex, or city, hospital, everyone is kind of counting on each other for moral support, physical support, whatever the case may be. But really kind of look at it as if it's that puzzle. And if you distill it down, your very own puzzle piece is what makes you you. And that's what makes you part of that community, that bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that you matter in a community is very interesting. Identity. That's what came to mind when you were talking just now. identity within the community that you serve, right, or participate in, is it surely plays a part in your lives and in the lives of the people we touch. I mean, you guys certainly have identity in your community, and perhaps even in multiple communities. I was thinking about how Sterling is known for Cap for Kids, and then through Sterling, I found my desire to do Colorado Captain, and then Colorado Captain is one of the main ways that Kirk has re-entered my world. Similarly, Kirk has found himself in many different walks of life, whether it be military service, performance, physical training, and then Sterling in his life, he's constantly on the move for years, both inside and outside of the cosplay community. Uh, heck, I even began my journey to this moment in time by being a musical theater undergrad working at the Renaissance Festival. It's just wild how each of us grows in our communities, but we also grow for our communities. So Sterling, what do you think about your identity in the community? I mean, you're so tied up for Cat for Kids, right? And you're very much the face of the organization. Your charity work has an identity within the community, and you've been doing it long enough that maybe you now have an idea of how you fit in there, right? What is your puzzle piece, so to speak?
We can certainly kind of talk about that particular puzzle piece in the context of Cat for Kids, and I can talk about Cat for Kids as to what we do and how we do it. At its core, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose focus is to support children who are fighting cancer. And we do that a few ways. Our primary method for helping the kids is through our family sponsorship program. And the way that works is we'll sponsor families that have a child undergoing a cancer treatment, and we'll pay their bills. It could be mortgage, rent, utilities, car payment, cell phone, you name it, with the idea being that if we can reduce some of the enormous financial strain, and it is enormous, I can tell you stories, that these families are under, if we can reduce some of that strain and allow them to focus on their child, then the child has a better chance at beating cancer. So that's kind of our main program, our main focus. And then secondarily, we have these in-person visits, whether they be at home or in the hospital or in another venue, to where we can bring pop culture heroes and princesses and all kinds of characters to meet the children face to face to kind of brighten their day. But that's more of a secondary program where we found the most profound help that we can provide is through the family sponsorship program. As fun as the visits are, and we'll continue to do the visits forever, but the biggest help we can give is through the family sponsorship program. And so from an identity perspective, tying back to that, I have, for better or worse, depending on anyone's perspective, become the face of this. I started this as a concept in my head in 2013, and it's grown to be this very large organization that has helped dozens of families now, with children undergoing cancer treatments, and we're just growing and growing all the time. And so that's a very much a part of who I am. And then there's all the other layers of cosplay and my day job that pays for all of this, and friendship and family and that sort of thing. But in a nutshell, that's you were right. A lot of my identity is tied up in the face of Cat for Kids, and I've got no regrets about that.
Well, you're dressed as Captain America right now, man. I mean, it's super cool. You gotta help everybody understand the awesome part of this group is just that. I mean, some may not know that the name Cap for Kids is actually an acronym for Cosplayers Against Pediatric Cancer. So help everyone understand how is it that it goes from cosplay to combating cancer?
Yep. It's I think cosplay is kind of the entry point, right? It's how so many of us have met. It's how I met Kirk. That's kind of the this kind of love. Going back to your concept around community, we do have
Right.
this amazing cosplay community around the world. Really, I mean, you know people all around that are in
Oh,
this
sure.
community. It's a fantastic community, and so that's kind of where it started. My love for cosplay and this concept of like, trying to emulate a character that that you love and you see a lot of that you want to be like, basically. And so, back when this was just an idea in my head in 2013, people would say, "Oh, you know what? You should dress up as Captain America one day. You'd be great." I'm like, I don't know if I ever could, and um, and that idea kind of like planted the seed in my mind, and then all of my work, which we could talk about a bit around helping raise funds and awareness for cancer fighting kiddos, like just kind of molded into this. Um, but yes, that's where it started. And so then we kind of built this concept around, okay, we can fundraise in the cosplay or pop culture community. And so we would have a presence or a booth or whatever you call it at a specific comic convention or pop culture convention, and tell people about the charity and what we're doing and how we're doing it, and raising funds that way and raising awareness. That's kind of where we started. And so then cosplayers started flocking from all over the place to say, hey, I want to help, even if it's just fundraising, or hey, I want to do hospital visits with you, or that sort of thing. And so it kind of became this thing. And so we are intrinsically tied to cosplay, and I'm totally happy with that. It's such a great community and I love it. And the whole power of when we go in full suit into see the kids know it's like they're superhero, like that. There's no question in their mind. They're like, what is happening? I can tell you
Yeah,
stories
right.
about Batman visits that yeah, pretty crazy stuff. But back to your question around fundraising, that's primarily where we've done it, is around these conventions that are built around the pop culture community and cosplay itself. And now we're still doing that, but we're doing it through a network of cosplayers that are now on streaming services like Twitch and that sort of thing. So it's
Yeah.
growing and changing. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that answers the question.
Well, thank you for diving into that. So now I think I'm going to go ahead and shift back over to Kirk, asking about identity, and where you find that you fit into your community. Right. So I mean, your story has brought you to where you are, and I would love, Kirk, if you would share a little bit of your story, because I have had personally the great pleasure of watching you grow into this incredibly human being. And I want to know what brought you into military service. And I want to know where you find yourself now that you're outside of it. Sometimes you're picking up Thor's hammer. Sometimes you're wearing that whip and sporting a fedora like Harrison Ford. and then somewhere in the middle, you're training folks for the gym. And I'm just curious how all of these things blend together into the man that is now sitting on the other end of this podcast.
Yeah, so over the, I guess now 11 plus years we've known each other, yeah, I've worn many hats, but I guess bringing it back to when I was 17, it was like a Saturday before I had a cell phone, and my mom told me I had a call. So I went and got the phone, and it was an Army recruiter asking if I'd ever considered joining the Army. And they were like, if you ever are interested or want to learn more about it, feel free to pop down to the recruiting station. And I've always been interested in joining the military in some capacity, whether it's the Marine Corps or even, Coast Guard. Just always been in the back of my mind. And a lot of very influential father figure type people had previously served and kind of influenced me in joining, or at least kind of sparked that curiosity. I think I, like many, had that internal question of, do I have what it takes? And I think that phone call was the little push I needed, because I would never, looking back on it, if I'm real with myself, I never would have gone into the recruiting station on my own steam. But if I take it back further, I used to spend a lot of time at the alligator farm in southern Colorado. We're friends with the owners, and the two rules of alligator wrestling are don't hesitate and don't let go. Because if you're going to go and grab an alligator and you kind of hesitate, it'll turn around and bite you. And once you've got it, don't let go, commit to the bit. And in life, opportunities are like big scaly monsters, not too dissimilar from an alligator. Opportunities come at you head on. They're scary, and you can dodge out of the way and let them go by. But once it goes by, it's kind of a wet, slippery thing, a slippery tail, and it's hard to grab. So you got to face a beast like that head on, and it might put you on your butt, but if you succeed, you'll come on top of that opportunity. So I looked at this opportunity of joining the Army, and in the reserves, there's a program called the Split Op program, where you go to basic training between your junior and senior year of high school, come home, graduate high school, and then you ship out to your AIT training and then to your unit. And I had the opportunity to do that, and I was like, you know what? This is one of those, and I don't know. It wasn't like filled with this overwhelming sense of patriotism. It just felt like this is what I'm always meant to do. So I went to the recruiting station and was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this thing. And I had to bring my parents because they had to sign a paper since I was only 17, allowing me to go, which they had mixed feelings about. Your 17-year-olds joining the Army during wartime. But I think they recognized that this was the right path for me. And that's what got me in the Army. So I was in for a total of 8 years and got to do a lot of really amazing things, but I never deployed. And that was something that really ate away at me. As friends of mine who didn't even necessarily get the same training or same level of training as I had, were deployed, and didn't necessarily, or not all of them necessarily made it back. It always kind of ate away at me. Like, why not me? And I would even try to insert myself into positions where I was more appealing to be deployed, or like plucked into a different unit and deploy. And it was something I was really struggling with, especially when I got out, with like Veterans Day, people coming up and saying, hey, thank you for your service. But like, what did I really do? I was paid by people's hard-earned taxpayer dollars to do basically cool stuff, play Army, jump out of helicopters, blow stuff up, to train people, even to start jujitsu. But, what did I really do? But I was listening to a podcast, and Will Willis, who was one of the hosts of the show Forged in Fire for a while, he was in the special operations community, but had kind of a similar experience where he had never deployed. And listening to that podcast with him, he said he felt like the most decked out GI Joe that never came out of the box. And that struck a chord with me. And it was kind of healing for me, and something that I was having trouble with, because, why not me? Because it felt like my whole life was leading to this, but I was benched the whole time. I have all this training and nothing to do with it. And really popular author and podcaster Jocko Willings talks about the importance of finding your next mission, especially for the military. For in the veteran community, when you get out of the military and you're transitioning into the civilian life or whatever, I think for me, always having a goal or having something to work for, it's something that's important to me. But I was having trouble finding my next mission. But I got out of the Army in 2017. And I'd already been going to Comic Cons at this point, and I think it was like 2016, something like that. The two gentlemen that I have the pleasure of sharing this conversation with were in a panel called Cosplay for a Cause, and I've never been so moved and so touched. Hearing Sterling talk, hearing Casey, shout out to Hospital Batman Casey, yourself, Matt, hearing your stories, I was so moved, and I was literally weeping at a Comic Con, and I told myself, this is my next mission. I need to get involved. But I let a whole year go by without getting involved. And then when I went to that same panel the next year, I was all in. And there's a quote I really like that if you take 2 or 3 things that you're better than most at, and you combine them into the one thing that you're probably the best in the world at, well, then you've got something good going. That's your ikigai, or that should be your career. And so all of a sudden, I saw these people who were passionate about cosplay, passionate about nerdy things, in that Comic Con community, but also had a hand in the pie over here. And they have a unique opportunity to use these passions to make their community, their circle, a better place. And I don't just love these things. Sick kids in the hospital love these things too. Their parents love those things. So I had, my next mission, and I had to get involved. Because it's not deploying, or it's not going toward those things, but it's the next mission. It's maybe what I've always been meant to do. It's what my life maybe has been leading toward, what these experiences, or maybe even some of my frustrations, have been guiding me toward. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's kind of how I ended up doing those things, or like here with you guys on this podcast.
Man, I love that you hit on this topic. You can call it you can call it passion, you can call it whatever you want, but taking something that you're awesome at, and then finding a way to offer that to someone else for no other reason than the benefit of their day being better is awesome, and it's fascinating. But then sometimes the potential struggles of people in your community can seem really overwhelming, and it can be hard to know how best to help. Maybe you saw someone hurting and realized that you had the skills to be of service, but you might also find that you're just at a complete loss on how to help. To that end, how do you face that struggle? How do you approach that feeling of knowing someone is in need, or even identifying that need?
Certainly. So you make a really good point about the potential struggle that I think a lot of people have. It's not potential, it's like the real struggle to recognize a need in the community. I talk to people all the time that they're like, I've always wanted to do charitable giving, or I've always wanted to help volunteer, but I just don't know what I would do. And that's a very fair, very real thing. I think it's so common for most of all of us humans to be just kind of up to our eyeballs and just trying to I kind of picture like barely treading water and keeping your head above water to just like survive,
Yeah.
right? And so it can be difficult to be able to get yourself enough out of the water to look around and see, okay, who needs help? Like I'm doing okay. Who needs help? So it's a very real thing. So I think it's important to, and I often tell folks this, that um, there are ways that you can get involved and can help when you once you get yourself stable, but don't don't beat up yourself too much if you're just trying to like get by and you want to help, but it's difficult. But back to this concept of like recognizing needs in the community. I think this happened early on. Well, not early on, but many years ago. I had helped my friends and coworkers. They would be doing fundraisers for like St. Jude's, or more specifically Boston Children's Hospital. And through that, I was like, okay, well, I'll help you out. I'll help spread the word, and I'll make some donations and tell me more about it so I can speak to it. And then just seeing this whole concept that, okay, there are these children that are 2 years old, 1 year old, 3 years old, 5 years old, that have done absolutely nothing to deserve it, are fighting for their lives against this nasty disease. And how fair is that? It's not fair. And so, can we help them? Is there a way to help them? Is there a way to help? I'm not a a scientist or doctor to like go out and find a cure, but is there some other way that I can help these people? So that kind of like was working around in my head for the longest time. And then now is probably to tell you, I think you've heard this story, kind of how I got into this whole thing. Around that same time,
Sure.
around this time, I had those friends saying, "Hey, you should be Captain America. You should cosplay." And I'm like, I don't know if I ever could. And then and I had already been doing fundraisers and worked with Boston Children's Hospital through a friend of mine, and really got to know the kids, got to know their names and their stories, and thought, God, I want to do more. I just don't know what to do. And that's when, right around that exact time, is when I saw the story about Lenny, who is the Route 29 Batman back east.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys remember him. And saw this whole story, and of course it went viral because he got pulled over in his Lamborghini by the cops, and the cops were like taking selfies with Batman in his Lamborghini and all this, and it went viral, and found out, okay, this is a guy who goes and visits kids in children's hospitals up and down the East Coast, and brightens their day and brings them little toys, and just like tries to bring a little bit of cheer to their life. And that's where, after I saw that, I was like, wait, connecting the dots. Maybe if Batman can do this, Captain America can do this. And so
Yeah.
that's where I kind of like, oh, I could maybe do this. And so that started this whole thing of like just doing visits and like getting to kind of bringing some cheer to these children's lives. And so partnered with Brent's Place and Children's Hospital Colorado, and started doing a bit of that. But then to again add on to this concept of recognizing a need in a community, I did that for a few years and kind of started Cap for Kids. And initially, we were just fundraising for Children's Hospital Colorado and Brent's Place. So any donations I took in immediately went to those two organizations. And through my partnership with those two organizations, I found a need in the community, and that just talking with the social workers, found out that as I was trying to figure out, okay, what could we do more? How could we do more? And what about their medical bills? They're astronomical, right? So maybe we could do something around their medical bills. And we learned that most of the families have primary and secondary insurance, and there are programs within like St. Jude's. That's why you donate to St. Jude's, great organization, to help offset the medical bills. And Children's Colorado as well has those programs. But what they don't have is they don't have anyone paying for Verizon. They don't have anyone paying Comcast. They don't have anyone paying their mortgage, their rent, that sort of thing, and they're struggling, and you can see why. So you had mentioned earlier, you get this news, you're a parent, you get this news that your child has a potentially terminal disease, and you want to be by their side and give them every fighting chance that you possibly can. And your job is saying, hey, no, you got to be here 40 hours a week or else, kind of thing. What are you going to do? You're going to be with your child, of course. Everyone, there's no question about that. And so what happens time and time again, and it's a story of pretty much every family we have sponsored, is that one or more of the parents loses their job because they're taking their child to the hospital and to their appointments, and having to stay for weeks at a time, if not months, at the hospital. And so then the bills start piling up. And so as we learned about this, we're like, okay, that's where we can help. That's where we can help. And we know there are people out there, to go back to the community thing, that want to help, but they don't know how or where. We can connect these dots. We can raise those funds and get them into the hands of these families who are fighting for their child's life. And that's what we did.
Man, that's fascinating. You actually brought something to my mind that I hadn't thought about in a very long time. Which is how oftentimes people assume that you you had the answer from the beginning, right? When really it's much like a lot of life, where a lot of times you're just kind of casting a net to see, are there any fish in the water, or is there anyone out there that needs help, right? Free hugs if you need them. But then after a certain amount of hugs, you're gonna find someone who maybe doesn't just need a hug, like they need to be held. And it connects to what Kirk was saying, where you didn't shy away from searching for that opportunity. You said, no, I'm going to hang on and I'm going to ride this out. And here it is, which is really cool.
Hopefully it opens up an opportunity for people who are thinking about it, like, how can I help or whatever. I worry that, to your point, I worry that people are like, oh, this guy's got it all figured out, and it's just boom, it just waved a magic wand and all of a sudden he was like, no, it's like making mistakes and errors and learning all the time. So hopefully that can inspire people. Sure. Like, you don't have to have it figured out, just grow and learn and change and go with the dominoes, as you said.
Yeah, Sterling, I remember meeting you for the first time. Not that this is about me, but a lot of folks out there, they know me as Colorado Captain, and they've come to know me because of a number of viral videos that went around the internet, right? And they're videos of a guy in this really cool looking suit, or at least it used to be. And the bike that's pristine, and the whole thing looks like I drove off of a movie set, right? But what people don't know is that the first time that I met you, I was in this baggy leather monstrosity of a costume that I had cobbled together from a bunch of different things, and I came up to you in a helmet that barely fit my head, and I was like, hey there, just want to tell you you're super cool, and maybe I can help someday. And to your credit, you just told me, yeah, keep trying, keep going. And it reminds me of how much you can grow when you're surrounded by people that want you to keep trying and want to see how far you can take that opportunity to keep trying. You will make mistakes, but it's important not to forget that you'll grow. I mean, gosh, Kirk, your whole life for years has been helping other people do what they could do to be recognize what they could be. And I'm curious what your response would be if I asked you the same question. How do you recognize a need in your community? You both told me that the individual plays such a huge part within the community when you're seeking to grow and nurture said community. So now that's what I want to ask is how did you find your way to what you're doing right now? What is it that you feel like you are doing to help influence others around you?
I think for me, and it's not to sound selfish, but I try to think about a community that I would want to live in. And then rather than just trying to build myself up, um, the rising tide raises all the ships. So if I can make people in my immediate circle their best selves, or I can at least inspire them or show them that they already have the tools. You don't even need me to give you the tools, you already have them. But if I can show you, hey, you have the potential to be more if you want to be, it's right there in front of you. I think wishing that makes your community better, selfishly. That makes me, or that makes my community better. And that puts me in a community I want to be in. But then going back, I just love to be inspired. I seek inspiration. So if I can build you up and like Sterling, Matt, you guys inspire the heck out of me. So if I can make the people that inspire me even more inspirational and better, well, then I feed off that and it inspires me and motivates me to be my best me. And it's like chasing each other. And like you get fired up about that, and then I get excited about it. Like I remember I was always aware of what you were up to, Matt, but I didn't know the full story behind what you were doing and the story behind Colorado Captain. So like instead of just being a guy on a motorcycle saying, hey, look at me, for your own fame or self-importance or whatever, you found a way to initially hook people with the wow factor of being, the cosplayer on the motorcycle, but then also to redirect the attention and message to, hey, look at these amazing and important causes. You found a way to circumvent that expectation of self-important fame and make it about something more, and how others can grow from it. And this podcast is another way to hook people and introduce them into ways of doing good for one another and in their own lives. And maybe with like fitness or motivation, my hook can be similar. And I don't know if that makes sense. But when I look for a need in the community, I think of how can I take ownership over everything I can, and then in taking ownership over it, learn about it. Not just donate what I think it needs, but instead ask and learn what does it need? Like, what does it actually need? How can I build it up? How can I help you accomplish your goals? Not just be like, hey, you need to do this. You need to be more muscular, lose weight, or whatever the case may be. But hey, what do you need? What do you like? What can I do for you? And also not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you. Because in turn, helping you, well, that's going to do a lot for me personally. But yeah, and then in doing so, it helps better all of us, better us all. And then I can only imagine if I can like help inspire people in my circle, then they can help inspire people in their circles and so on. You get that ripple effect going. And yeah, I think that's what helps me in those times of just feeling helpless, and that helpless, kind of what we've all been feeling in this last year. Just, I don't know what to do. These problems are bigger than me. They're bigger than what my puzzle piece can fit into. What can I do? And I think that starts with you, taking ownership over what you can. I'm going to be the best me I can, because that's, as selfish as it sounds, being the best me that I can be, the best version of myself. I don't know how to effectively help someone when they need it if I'm not the best me, So what does that mean? Despite this quarantine, despite the sicknesses out there, despite the frustration or loss, I'm going to be physically strong despite all that. Because I know if I'm physically strong, that's going to help me be mentally strong. And if I'm mentally stronger, that's going to help me be emotionally strong. So then if I'm physically emotionally, mentally, spiritually strong, that's going to help someone when they really need it. But it comes back to you, or it comes back to me. It comes back to the individual bettering themselves. So I think obviously when you look at your community, you see the obvious sore thumb, like, okay, that needs help. I can go to that directly, easy. But in times of that helplessness, or when you just don't know what to do, just do the best you can. Do what you can. And like you guys said, those dominoes kind of start appearing and lining up for you, and you start doing like that path. Once you like have your direction, you can kind of figure out the path, and then before you know it, you've gone further than you ever thought you can go.
Yeah, I like that you touched on hope too, because it's one of the biggest themes in this podcast. I mean, I'll be seeking to shed light on what hope looks like, not just in a post-COVID world, but in all dark times. I'm sure our parents saw some intense history, and our kids and our kids' kids are going to see a lot of history after we're gone. But one question I think is always going to remain, which is, how do you help? And how do you hope to help? I mean, God, Kirk, how do you even get out of the bed in the morning? Because for some of us, it's not feeling as easy as we wish it would.
I think, especially in like hoping to help, especially in the dark times and stuff like that. And one thing that I think you and Sterling exemplify in spades. When I was in the Army Reserves, I was tasked or like voluntold to be the suicide prevention and awareness representative for my unit. And part of what I taught, or a concept that I talked about in my class, was if you would be able to help someone, or if you were going through something and you had the opportunity to help or save someone going through the same thing, would it be worth enduring that pain or that suffering or that hardship to save that other person? And it's not for everyone, but I feel like there's a specific type of person or a specific breed or someone who answers that call, where that's a part of their internal discipline, where they'll step up and say, yeah, if not me, then who else? And so, for you, Matt, or Sterling, for you guys to insert yourself into those like situations or into those hospitals to interact with those sick kids, it impacts you, and it's hard. And I think it's again, it's not something that everyone wants to do necessarily, but it's something that you guys have volunteered to do. Going back to inspiration, that's something that like really inspires me personally and kind of motivates me to want to be that kind of person, and make myself the best type of person for those in need. And I think for me, knowing that there's guys like you out there, that helps inspire me. That helps give me hope. But in times where it's just tough to get out of bed, and you don't feel like there's any hope, and you don't know, where you're going, if you don't have, if the miracle you're hoping and praying for doesn't immediately present itself, be that miracle for someone. Step up and be that person for them. And so I think that's why people like you, Matt, or you, Sterling, you guys, you're role models for people like myself, to kind of inspire hope, especially in times where there's not or I feel like hopeless, or it's tough to get out of bed.
Now, you're awesome, and we both like you too. So self high five, I guess. No, okay, but you touched on a very interesting chord that I would like to turn over to Sterling at this point. What I felt you spoke to, Kirk, was despair. You said you made a decision to move forward in order to help someone else in the face of despair. Now, Sterling, you visit terminally ill children. You appear to them as this hero that walks like right out of the television screen into their hospital room, whether it's as Batman or Cap, or maybe in Kirk's case it's Thor, or any of these other wonderful individuals that we work with. But regardless of what you're wearing, Sterling, you are a figurehead to many who want to help. And you've chosen to brighten the day of human beings that may not get to see tomorrow. And I really want to know, how do you feel about this mission that you've chosen to take on for yourself? I mean, I feel like I'm a better way to put it. How do you handle sick kids? How does that affect you? How does that impact you?
It's not easy. It's not easy in any way, shape, or form. You may know I'll get into that in a minute. But I guess I'll back up and say, I kind of knew going into this, like, okay, this is what you're signing up for. Some of these kids won't make it, and you realize that, and you kind of, Kirk was touching on this. You were touching on it, that you see people in need. You see them needing your help, and you see yourself in a position to be able to help them. And so, to me, it's just, there's no question, there's no decision to make. You just do it. Now, it's not, I've done hospital visits to where I'm like, hold it together until you get out of the room, hold it together.
Yeah.
There's been a few of those. And then there's events that we've done where we're sitting there and talking with the parents who've lost their children, and that one is super, super hard as well. And then, and I guess what we can talk about now, like, just a few months ago, we lost one of ours. And so it's awful. It's the worst. It's horrible. But it's never gonna, it will do the opposite effect of, like, what you think, what some people might think, like, oh, I just don't want to deal with those bad feelings. But it inspires me, like, I have to do more. I have to help more. I have to, every time that happens, it's like I'm either further invested to help out and dive deeper in, and what else can I do, and that sort of thing. Because when you talk to these parents and what they've lost, it's, you just have to do it. And so I know I'll do more hospital visits where we'll be in the rooms where we know for a fact these children aren't gonna walk out of that room. And and then there will be sponsored families undercut for kids that won't make it, just because that's the nature of this disease. But these people need my help, and I will continue to help them at any cost. So
It's an amazing thing to find yourself in that duality, well, where you are all at once in a position to inspire someone in the middle of tremendous loss, but then you yourself feel that loss. And you might be asking yourself, how do I process this personally and internally, knowing full well that my reaction to my choices will impact these families perhaps just as much as the illness that they're coping with. It's an incredible thing to attempt to be a support and a source of solidarity in someone's life once that life has just been upended. And I'm hesitant to broach a heavy topic, but have you ever had moments in your work with Cap for Kids, or even just in the cosplay community, where you wondered what it was all for? Perhaps questioned its value? How does dressing in a costume for someone matter in the grand scale of a child potentially leaving this earth, never to be held by their mother and father again?
I would say more than you could ever imagine, more than you will know, more than you can know. I'm finding out now about things that apparently I was some source of inspiration to someone years later, and they went off and did some amazing things, and I'm like, how? I didn't, like, I was just a guy in a suit, like you said, like, I'm just trying my best to help out. That's really all I'm doing here. I never saw, or expected or even really thought I wanted to that whole concept of being able to, this domino effect, and beyond just our own, but having this domino effect out throughout the community, as you said. You can't know, you can't even know, like you can know immediately for that family, for that child, you're making a difference. You see their eyes light up. You've seen that dozens, both of you have seen that many times. So you know in that moment, but you don't necessarily know like who else you're inspiring, and who's watching, and it can have repercussions beyond anything you can imagine. Like the last big convention fundraiser we did, I guess was 2019 in Denver. Just watching all of these people whose lives are just totally different now because of this charity that was created, this silly idea in my head that I just wanted to help more people. Yeah. And it's not about me. It's never been about me. It's just like, look, I'm just trying to help. And at first I was a little uncomfortable that people are like you inspire me. I'm like, why? I'm just trying to help. But at this point I've seen it happen to where now amazing good things are happening because of this. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. If it helps people go do more good things, then that's great.
So you would say then that there is value in those small moments, these moments where it feels like you're walking or even crawling rather than running?
Yeah. To tie back to what you said about like that concept, you're going into a hospital room and this child is, these parents are struggling with feelings that we could never imagine of soon losing their child. And what could this possibly matter, this me dressing up in a suit? It does so much good to them. It does so much good to the family, and like I said, to others watching, it does good for them too.
Yeah. Kirk, you mentioned earlier that concept of being able to sacrifice some of yourself for the betterment of others, whether that be through personal responsibility or just being a friend. You said that it meant a lot to you. That at a convention hall panel where people are just talking about applying themselves in the smallest ways to charity work inspired you to take on a mission for yourself. Like I said earlier, there's running, there's walking, there's even just crawling to the finish line. And sometimes you have to keep crawling just to keep going, but you never know who might be watching you while you're doing it. You never know who might actually be accidentally inspired by any number of things that you're doing. And I think that includes sacrifice, because what you might think of as just having fun, or you might think is a selfishly motivated desire, it can turn out to be what someone sees as a wonderful sacrifice. I think that's where I'd like to bring in your military service. You've been willing to sacrifice yourself for others, Kirk. But where does that come from? Where does that drive to be all that you can be for others come from, either internally or externally?
I think for me, it's always been a sense of duty or purpose, with a willingness to sacrifice, but the intention isn't necessarily to sacrifice. I think for me, the bigger sacrifice came from the people around me, or it's kind of like the people supporting those fulfilling the duty. Obviously, if you're deploying soldier, Marine, airman, or sailor, you're courageously fulfilling a sense of duty and your willingness to sacrifice. And there's those who do pay the ultimate sacrifice. But for someone like myself, I can honestly say I enjoyed every moment of my service. Good, bad, and ugly, I still enjoyed it. But the sacrifice came from my parents signing that document, or the girlfriend that had to say goodbye. For me, I was like, let's go. But sacrifice came from everyone else. And obviously there are those that do pay the ultimate sacrifice. And, there's the friends who have to say goodbye and stuff. But for me personally, it's always been driven by a sense of duty and purpose. And that's kind of how I'm able to override it, for that sense of sacrifice. But I think sacrifice itself implies giving up something or a loss. And I feel like I've been blessed to not necessarily feel that I'm sacrificing anything of myself. I just feel that sense of duty within myself. But sacrifice comes from all the people around me who are willing to support me in those endeavors. And then talking for people that I've known or been aware of that have paid that ultimate sacrifice, trying to turn that into a sense of duty or purpose. For fallen soldiers, SEALs and sailors, making sure that they're never forgotten. I try not to dwell on the loss, but instead try to celebrate the life and then the inspiration and the story that they can continue to tell or inspire through, maybe my actions, hopefully if I'm doing it right. But for me, it's never been about my own personal sacrifice or even overcoming that. It's been driven by a sense of that duty or purpose, or saying, I have an opportunity to make this situation better, and I'm willing to sacrifice if it comes down to it. But I'm going to do everything I can to come out on top. It pays to be a winner. I want to be a winner in that situation. And I guess that's kind of where it comes from, if that makes sense.
Being a winner. That's a sentiment worth acknowledging. Everyone is trying all the time in this great game of life, and we always have to be pushing forward. But I wonder how a lot of families and how a lot of individuals will be feeling coming out of this pandemic. So many people have experienced loss. And we've talked about sacrifice, and we've talked about the heavy emotional burden of losing someone or something that was very precious to you. But I think that this pandemic has been, in so many ways, a real beacon or a lighthouse warning us of rocky waters for communities and for people who thought that they knew what it looked like to be a winner, only just to realize that there is a real human factor in winning at life. And that maybe perhaps life isn't so much a finish line or a goal to be better than someone else, but it's more like a team sport where you're linking arms with someone. You're saying, come on, we can do this together. And we're going to get through this truly together. And coming to that realization, I think that's something worth celebrating. There's going to be a lot of celebrating going on in the coming weeks due to good vaccine numbers, due to health improving across not just the world, but specifically our nation. Many pandemic restrictions have been lifted. So much so that we might actually be facing a real-life Independence Day, celebrating 4th of July with friends and loved ones without masks, without feeling like the world is falling apart, but instead coming back together again. I've even heard of some really important events taking place as early as Memorial Weekend. One such event rushed to the forefront of my mind as this interview progressed. It's an event that actually relates heavily to the lives of my two rather unique guests. You see, Sterling knows that as Colorado captain, I've tried to raise awareness for Cat for Kids at rallies and conventions all over the nation. And this weekend was one of those very rallies, the Realities Ride for Children. It's a 3-day celebration, the largest motorcycle poker rally in the nation, and possibly the world. And it's all to help the kids, to better their lives, to pull them out of poverty or abusive situations, and really give them a fighting chance, which is not unlike what Sterling does with Cat for Kids. Now, he tries to give families a fighting chance, but in the midst of this celebration, a big motorcycle rally, a giant cookout, a party coming out of COVID-19 to fundraise for a children's nonprofit. There's also a very somber holiday in there that shouldn't be lost in the middle of all that. Memorial Day. It's a day of singular importance where we as Americans choose to honor those who laid down their lives for their country. It's a 3-day weekend wherein we've all chosen to record this podcast. It's also a day that Kirk, a man who watched his brothers and sisters be deployed to war zones in far-off lands, and he doesn't forget. Kirk, if you could take a moment, please, just to speak on what Memorial Day might mean to you and your fellow servicemen and women.
So, in my own personal life, again, Memorial Day has kind of taken on a different meaning now, having been out of the military. I try to celebrate it kind of in a different way. I know it sounds weird celebrating um, kind of a somber day, but what I try to do is celebrate the life by doing things like hero workouts. And in the CrossFit community, there's I don't know, there's a bunch of different hero workouts, but kind of the most famous one and the most popular one is the Murph, which is named after Lieutenant Michael Murphy, who made that ultimate sacrifice in Operation Red Wing. And the Murph is a 1 mile run, 100 chin ups, 200 push ups, 300 squats, and another mile run. A lot of people do it with a weighted vest. It's not necessary, but the idea behind any of the hero workouts are that they suck and they hurt, and there's going to be a point where your mind starts playing tricks on you and you want to quit and you want to stop, you want to tap out, but that's kind of the whole point of it. And it's to keep pushing forward, and kind of using the I don't know, I guess using that sacrifice as inspiration and motivation to keep pushing and keep moving forward. And I think that's a good metaphor just in general in life, with those fallen, what would they give for one more day or one more sunset? Look into their kids' eyes one more time. Um, and so if I have a bad day at work, how hard is it really? If I can push through this workout, I can push through a hard day at work, and I can, get through those hard times. And I think kind of on a bigger scale, that's kind of what the hero workouts sort of embody, but always bringing it back to remembering those soldiers, remembering those airmen, sailors, Marines. On that operation where Michael Murphy died, there was also a gentleman named Matt Axelson who was killed. There was two helicopters, the recovery team that were killed, but also Danny Dietz from Littleton, like our hometown. He was killed on that operation. They're real people. They're not. It's not just a story in a book or a movie or anything like that. They're real people, and I think part of my purpose or duty now, having been out of the military, is remembering them, but sharing their stories and sharing their life with as many people as I can, because maybe they'll be inspired. And bringing it back to what we were talking about community and your puzzle piece and building up the people around you to then build up your community. Maybe that could be in a small way part of what I'm meant to do, is just shed a little light on that to people who might not be exposed to that, and hopefully better the community in that sense through kind of the lens of I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just kind of bring that to people, and hopefully they'll be inspired to better themselves. And then maybe that sacrifice wasn't for nothing, or whatever. That people can grow from that and build their community and make their community better. So that's one thing I do, is doing hero workouts like the Murph. This month I've been doing some form of the Murph, like a modified version or a scaled down version, every single day, because it's my first time doing it since my shoulder surgery. And I just want to make sure that I can give it everything I got. So this definitely has been like kind of a bittersweet month of, achieving physical goals, but also, remembering why I'm doing it and why I want to give it everything I got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing I do to kind of celebrate Memorial Day, which is kind of weird to say because it's, celebrating a somber day, but in trying to celebrate the life of, fallen soldiers, one thing I do is I do a lot of hero workouts, which in the fitness community or in like a lot of the CrossFit community, hero workouts are there to kind of memorialize the fallen. And probably the most famous one is called the Murph, and it's the one I do the most often. And it's named after Lieutenant Michael Murphy, who was killed in action during Operation Red Wing, which is in like the book and the movie Lone Survivor. But Michael Murphy gave his life to rescue his guys, and on that mission there was also a gentleman named Danny Dietz, who's from Littleton, our hometown. That you know, it, doing those kind of things not only um, keep their memory alive, but also you get an opportunity to share their story, because books and movies are great, but they're real people. Movies kind of romanticize this idea of battle and stuff like that, but it's important to take a look and realize, hey, they were real people. Just like you, just like me. They're a brother, father, son, boyfriend, whatever the case may be. They were real. They're not just this character in a movie. And I think that's important to kind of remember, and also share their story and their sacrifice. So the hero workouts like the Murph, they suck. They're really hard, and they take a while to do. And there's going to come a point while you're doing it where you want to stop, where you want to quit. You want to tap out because it is really hard. But that's kind of the whole point. It's that idea of that kind of suffering but pushing through. And then once you do push through, how much easier is the rest of the day? How much easier is kind of the rest of your life? Work. How bad is work? You've already done something harder. And I think kind of on a surface level, that's one of those things that Memorial Day brings to the table is, what would those guys give for one more day or one more minute, one more sunset, look in their child's eyes one more time. And, so that way I can't afford to waste a day. I can't afford to, say I had a bad day because, I need to give it everything I got. I need to give it 100% every minute. Do I do that? Absolutely not. But I try to. And, one thing I've done this last month, this is my first time. Tomorrow will be my first time doing the Murph, like in its entirety since I had my shoulder surgery. So I'm trying to kind of overcome that. And I've been doing a modified or scaled version of the Murph every day this month to prepare for tomorrow, to kind of use that motivation and inspiration as fuel for my own I guess like goals and kind of overcoming that. But I think also going back to that sense of community, using those stories and inspiration to kind of inspire those around you and build that community and kind of grow together. So I think that's one thing, like, Memorial Day can take on a lot of meanings. That's one thing it's kind of meant to me over the years is, pushing yourself kind of further than you thought you were, but then in doing so, growing that sense of, being the best puzzle piece you can be, and then growing that community and inspiring others.
Sterling, now you've seen families find hope and you've seen families lose hope. It's no coincidence that this huge rally to help kids occurs on a day when, as Kirk said, we're trying to be inspired and never forget acts of heroism from our military service people who laid it all down. And I'm not sure that someone could draw a more perfect comparison to a concept of bravery and courage than that of not someone trained to fight for their country, but a child who has taken up a banner of love in support of their family as they come to terms with the reality and the despair of a pediatric cancer diagnosis. Sterling, you've walked down the road of hardship with these families. What are some stories of heroism that you have memorialized yourself throughout this wild journey that you've been on? Tell me about the little heroes in your life.
So there are many. I guess the acts of heroism to me is shown every day by these kids. I get to do video calls with them, and before it was like in person, and it will be in person again, and get to hear stories direct from the social workers and from the parents, and they are the toughest freaking kids anywhere. Like, none of this stuff phases them. They're being like just thrashed by not just the disease, but the treatment is often just as bad, if not worse. And their chin is up, they're smiling, they're trying to lift up their parents, like, because they see what this is doing to their parents, so they're trying to like put on a good face, and they're constantly saying things like, I got this, I'm gonna beat it, Like they're so strong, even at such a young age. They do that now. There's been a few that we've lost over the years, and um, you'll always remember those kids and how they were strong to the very end, and inspiring everyone around them, the social workers and all the stories they continue to tell this day about how well these kids fought, how hard they fought, and how much they lit up a room when they were in it, even though they were just being oppressed by all of this difficulty and hardship. So to me, this kind of moralizing their heroic efforts of not only fighting and hopefully beating this disease, but also um, inspiring everyone around them, from the doctors to the nurses to the social workers to their parents, and trying to just lift them all up. It's amazing to see. I've seen it in action many times, and you're just like, wow, how going back to what Kirk says, like on my worst day, I'm like, I have no I literally have nothing to complain about. Like these kids are so tough, and I'm like, and it's inspiring on my bad days to be able to lift myself up and say, dude, your day is nowhere near as bad as what Liam was dealing with on a daily basis, and was constantly lighting up the room. So um, that's the memorializing these heroic efforts. I love the through line. It's a very good point, and we do that quite often.
Service, sacrifice, community, memorials, heroism. These are not subjects for the faint of heart. Have you ever found yourself deep in thought during this interview? Did you notice yourself becoming more curious about the many ways that people impact your world, or the way that you impact theirs? Has all this talk about the monumental tasks facing our lives felt a little bit exhausting? Perhaps, like me, you've begun to wonder how anyone could ever hope to accomplish so much without crumbling under the pressure. Well, I think we've come to the right spot. You see, calling someone a hero can be a quick way to show your gratitude towards an incredible individual. But what if I told you that even your heroes have hard days? What do you do when you're not feeling very heroic? When the chips are down and you just feel like your best effort isn't enough? But like you, I want to help. But how can I be good to anybody if I haven't been good to myself also? It often feels like too much. So is there a way to be good to me? Asking for a friend. So, look, guys, for a lot of us out here, we are often tempted to become overwhelmed. We begin to feel like a raindrop, right, falling on a forest fire. And our desire to help just gets evaporated before we even have a chance to make a difference. So how do you find a balance of taking care of yourself when you know that so many others are still out there hurting? Then what can be said about self-care?
So for me, I think Kirk touched on this before, and I think he's got a really, really good point that you are so far more capable of helping others when you are taken care of, when you're at least in a position to breathe and center and be able to go out and recognize those needs in the community and that sort of thing. We talked about all of that, but if you allow yourself to be driven into the ground, so to speak, to the point that where you have no spoons, so to speak, it's going to be really hard to be effective in helping other people. And so you have to look at your body and your mind, your mental state, your emotional state as tools that you can leverage to help other people. And if those tools are depleted, there's very little that you can do. And so This last year, as we've already talked, has been incredibly hard on all of us, everybody on this call and everybody listening to this. It's been incredibly challenging for a number of reasons. And there's been a few moments myself I've had to just kind of just pull myself back and tune out a little bit from all of the negativity out there, and just kind of try to find some balance and some center and that sort of thing. And
Sure.
with the motivating factor of knowing that I have to be my best self to be able to help those kids that need the help, or whatever it is your specific cause is. But I think Kirk was totally right on target with, like, you do have to take care of yourself. You have to be in a position to where you can at least be capable of standing up and going and lending a hand. And so, yeah, totally with that. I've had to do that this last year because it's been hard.
Kirk,
It's definitely hard to find that balance. But if you can find a little bit of something that gets you in the right direction, that momentum snowballs and builds off. And you can find that balance and pick up where you left off. I think for the average Joe, a lot of people are reactionary to hurt or problems in their life. Really, it's like, oh man, today was a rough one. I need that beer. I need that comfort food, or I'll work out tomorrow. I just need to rest. But you're kind of letting the negativity of the day seep in. You're being reactionary and you're not being proactive. I think that initial motivation or that initial momentum needs to be proactive. Set yourself up for success. If the day does kick your butt, don't just settle into that and say, I mean, it's cliche, but don't just settle in. Wake up early and work out. And it can be any workout. Maybe wasn't even your best workout, but if you check that box and you've been there, you already did something positive, that's going to trickle into the rest of your day, and you're going to build that momentum. Or it doesn't have to be working out. Maybe it's a book that you've been wanting to read and you've just been staring at it on the shelf. Read that chapter. That chapter is probably going to turn into 2 chapters, and before you know it, you're getting ready for work and you're like, oh man, I started that book, I learned something new, or whatever the case is. And you find that momentum and you build on that momentum. And going back to your question about, what do heroes look like, or what is a hero, when you're not feeling heroic, right? For those that have made that decision, like what we've been talking about, choosing the path less traveled to make our communities a better place. We've sworn that it's not enough to be the best in the world. We have to be the best in the world on our worst day. Heroes are extraordinary. Or heroes aren't extraordinary people. They're average people who do extraordinary things, and not even because they necessarily want to in that moment, but because internally they have to. That discipline or that path that they've chosen, it's that work that we can't leave on the table.
well, it's no accident, I think, that I have found myself running into certain people over the course of my life. I run into them in moments of either great need, and they're trying to be there to help me, or I run into them in moments of exceptional joy, because we're celebrating a similar accomplishment. We find each other in moments of somber reflection during an attempt to acknowledge a defeat, and at the same moment begin a brighter future. I've encountered you, Kirk, again and again for a reason. And I've encountered Sterling again and again, and countless other individuals when I would have least expected it. And I think that that's a feeling that comes from community. It's understanding that no matter the miles that may separate us on any given day, that you can come home to a base understanding of how can I help you? How are you doing? Maybe I'm not doing so well, but I know that you feel what I feel, and maybe we can feel it together. And people can reverberate throughout your life. They have a power, perhaps, where the smallest individual can hold sway over an army. And I think we all believe that the smallest snowflake, a flake of snow, can start an avalanche. You guys are people who are always looking to find that pebble in someone's life and just start rolling it down the hill so that before you know it, there is a landslide of good in the world. But is that what hope is? I mean, how do you search for hope? Where do you find it? Do you find it in people? Do you find it in yourselves? And where can those who don't know and maybe are wondering how to go on, what might you say to others that might need to look for hope? Perhaps more to the point, gentlemen, is there going to be hope coming out of all this? I mean, my God, what a year this world has endured. Are we all just doomed to repeat a year like 2020? Can we learn from the missteps of our past, even though we can't seem to get ourselves out of a societal bog? Did you ever feel hopelessness as you consider the past year? It's an important question, I think, because for many, the sheer magnitude of life's goings on has been overwhelming.
I can jump in there. I'm with you, Matt. That last year there was several points where I'm like, I thought those same thoughts. Are we going to make it out of this? Like, there's so much darkness and despair, and not just from this deadly disease, but just from just people treating other human beings horribly, and you're like, can we get out of this? Like, can we, is there hope?
Yeah, because it felt like it just wouldn't stop, right? Like it felt like it just kept coming.
Yeah, over and over and over again. And you're like, how is there hope when you see people just treating other human beings so horribly? And so where I found it, I think you have as well, is this concept of just like looking for the helpers and seeing other people who are thinking like you, seeing this problem and doing what they can to help, whether it be, donating or protesting or volunteering or whatever it happens to be, like getting involved and joining in this sense of community, as you said, and realizing there are people out there like you who see these injustices and who want to join arm in arm with you to tackle these problems in the world. I think that's where I found hope, and I think that's where a lot of people could find hope, is understanding they're not alone. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling with the same negative emotions, same feelings that they are, and it's just a matter of finding those people. And I found them personally by looking for the helpers. So that went a long way, because I was struggling last year for sure.
Yeah, and I think you find what you go looking for. So like he looks for the helpers. When you look for the helpers, or like, I try to seek people that inspire me. It might take a while, but you end up finding what you look for. And if you're just like dwelling on the squalor of the issue, that's what you'll find. But I think you have to look for the helpers, and you have to look for the hope. Don't fixate on the bad. And then if that miracle you're hoping for doesn't immediately present itself, it's up to you to be that miracle or be that helper. And it can be as easy as just being friendly at work, being friendly and helpful to that annoying customer, or just not being rude. As small as that is, it can go a long way, or whatever the case is. Or when saying thank you when someone holds the door, start small. It's like, to bring it in the realm of comic books, I think there's like a comic where Wolverine is destroyed, and he like is destroyed down to like a molecular cell or something, and he's able to like rebuild himself off of just that cell.
Gross.
But you need to find that spark to create that fire. Like that avalanche you were talking about. It's made up of snow, which is made up of individual snowflakes. But without every single one of those individual snowflakes making up the snow, you wouldn't have the avalanche. The tidal wave is made up of those little water drops. Seek those little water drops and you'll find them. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be a small thing, because then you'll build that momentum. You'll see that snowball effect. Or like, I remember last year, Matt, when your suit was destroyed, everyone in that moment started donating to our friendly neighborhood cosplayer. And fixing your suit, it's not going to cure coronavirus, or it's not going to solve, issues around the globe. but it gives a community a sense of togetherness when we can all band together and donate for this guy that we see is doing good in the world.
Oh my God, it was one of the most humbling moments of my entire life. When our mutual friend, Hospital Batman, came to me at my job, and I was panicked, and I didn't know how I was going to do anything for my community over the next year. I mean, in the middle of all this hardship, for him to come to me and just say, "Hey, it's all taken care of," you would not believe my flummoxed response. My jaw just dropped to see such an outpouring of love. And for me, it was a confirmation of hope, of how even the most minute efforts can touch those around you in ways that you never thought possible. And maybe all it took was a pebble, right? Having a chance to look at something and go like, oh yeah, I know that guy. Let's do something nice for him. Well, that felt good. Maybe I can go do something else for the next person, and then the next person. It grows and it grows and it grows. So you correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, if I were to ask you, how could someone become a helper? I think it's just that. Yeah, plant a seed, because you never know if you just planted a blade of grass or if you planted an oak tree. And I think with that last sentiment, guys, I've just got to ask this, which is, what are you hopeful for in the coming years? I'm curious what's putting fire in your hearts. Sterling?
A great many things. If you had asked me that question a year ago, I would have had shorter answers. But things are looking up, right? As you mentioned earlier, things are starting to open up. They're getting this pandemic under control, at least here in the United States. Vaccinations all over the place, and like you said, we might actually have a real Independence Day celebration. With family and friends in person with no masks. Like that's something I'm very hopeful for. Giving friends and family hugs and spending time together and that sort of thing. I'm hopeful for soon being able to initiate hospital visits again. I've actually got one coming up at UCLA Children's, actually in Memorial Day weekend, and so it's this concept of like starting this up and being able to like improve people's lives and help them and help out the kids. I'm hopeful, and I'm given hope by you, Matt, and you, Kirk. Like just seeing how connected we are, seeing how we can inspire one another to do more and to help more. Like that gives me more hope than I can imagine. Just seeing people being inspired by one another and growing on this concept of giving and helping, it gives me so much hope. And seeing people chip in on that fundraiser, a bunch of everybody jumping in on that, and seeing somebody in need, that gives me hope to see people saying, "Hey, I want to help. I want to give somebody a hand." And I've seen it a bunch this last year, people jumping in. So those things give me hope. I'm more hopeful now than I have been in quite some time, which is great.
That's super inspiring. Kirk, same question. What are you hopeful for?
I mean, obviously there's getting back to the normal things that I'm hopeful for. Things like conventions, those type of interactions and stuff. But I think the thing I'm the most hopeful for and holding out for are people just being good to each other. And that's kind of a broad statement. But I think with everything, especially in the last year, neighbors feeling that they've been pitted against each other for whatever reason. So it's one of those things, like, you don't know what you have until it's gone. And in the last year, a lot of those like good things that we've taken for granted have been taken away. So I'm looking forward to just being able to go everywhere and smile at someone, and just kind of those small things. And I'm so hopeful for that. I'm hopeful for people like to shake hands, and have that sense of community and togetherness that hasn't been there. I think all those little things that we took for granted, that we didn't even realize how important they were, over the last year. I'm excited for those to come back because now, hopefully, we won't forget about them. Like, I remember I wrote a letter to myself when I was at boot camp. And I know it's super cheesy, but like, at boot camp, you don't have your phone, you don't have soda or, food. And I wrote a letter to myself saying that it was like toward the end of boot camp. And I said, in a couple of weeks, you'll be home. You can get in your car and drive to the gas station and have food if you want. You can see your mom if you want to. You can text that cute girl if you want to. Those are all things that right now you would kill for, because you miss it so much. Don't take those things for granted when you get back. Don't go soft. Don't forget about the me who exists in your memory. Stay hungry for those things, the little things. So I hope the world doesn't forget this. We remember it, we memorialize it in the sense that we can learn from it and be better off for it, despite the tragedies and in spite of the tragedies. We can just be good to one another on our worst day because it's not that bad.
Gentlemen, what's one last thing that you would like to maybe leave our audience with today? Is there anything that you would like to say to them or encourage them? Sterling?
I think I would. There's so many things, but I think tie back to the conversation we were having earlier about those people who are out there who want to help but just don't know how. I would just say find some niche, some corner, some area of the world that you have passion for, and look for people and organizations that are helping. There are lots, like whether you're looking for, you want to help people have clean water in third world countries, like there are organizations, they're great organizations you can partner with, to volunteer for, that sort of thing. Whether it be cancer, kids who are fighting cancer, or even breast cancer awareness. Like there's so many things, but just find something that that speaks to you, that you're passionate about, that you want to get involved in, and then just research, Google search. There's lots of organizations that you can partner with, volunteer for, that sort of thing, and just get involved. And through that, you're not solving all the world's problems in doing that. You're dipping your feet in and learning, and helping at the same time. And through that, this kind of domino effect that we talked before, to where you'll start learning and growing and changing, and who knows where that's going to go, and how many people you'll inspire, what other organizations you're going to help, that sort of thing. So and then just reach out to. There's plenty of people. Talk to Matt. There's plenty of people who have talked to a lot of people who are helpers out there, and you can connect with them, and they'll help you get started.
Kirk, what would you like to leave us with today?
I want to just say same with what Sterling said.
Ditto. Same. Podcast over.
But I guess for the sake of variety, I would just challenge the people listening to find something difficult to do every day. Find a way to challenge yourself, whether that's something challenging yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Just find a way to push yourself and be 1% better every day. If you could be 1% better tomorrow than you were today, where will you be in 100 days? Where will you be in 365 days from now? Just those little things, you'd be surprised at how much of an impact that can make. So I guess that's what I'd leave people with. Find a way to challenge yourself, because in bettering yourself, that 1% every day, that's going to, impact not only yourself, but also in your community. You can be that helper that people are seeking. It's going to help you seek the helpers. So I guess that. And then also what Sterling said.
All right. My guests for today's podcast have been Sterling Bailey, founder of Cap for Kids, helping families fight pediatric cancer, and all around jack of all trades and pretty decent guy, former service member and trainer Kirk Brockman. I am Colorado Captain. You guys already know where I am. Sterling, where can folks find you?
You can find me on capforkids.org. That's CAPFORKIDS.org.
And Kirk, anywhere folks should be looking for you these days?
Best place is probably on Instagram, cosplay.fitness. Working on other things, but for right now, that's probably the best one.
All right. Well, gentlemen, that's our show. Thank you very much. And to all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us on this, our inaugural Cap Across the Mirror. I look forward to seeing you next week. But until then, I'm with you till the end of the line.
Thank you, Matt.